welcome everybody to another edition of Think with a Drink. This is the financial web series brought to you by the Ares Foundation for Financial Education. This week's show, Craig, we're going to be doing target dates.
Fun.
Target date funds, and really, like, the tagline on there is, whose idea was this anyway, to go through with these things? But we'll do sort of a brief little history of target date funds, and then pros and cons, right? Why they're good, why they're bad, or somewhere in between, I guess, for most people.
Oh, do we have a spy versus spy slide in here?
Not really spy versus spy, but
okay.
It should have been, right? That could have been something. That's an ongoing theme with Greg and I, that and Rock'em Sock'em Robots, which we have to find a set to use at some point. Okay, so next slide. So my name is Tom Alessi. I am the president of the Ares Foundation. I have been in financial services for 24 years, actually into my 25th year. I'm an investment advisor. That means I act as a fiduciary whenever I'm giving guidance or advice to any of my clients. I'd like to introduce and bring in my vice president. Craig, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Craig Richardson. I'm the vice president of the Ares Foundation. And I've been doing this for about 20 years. And I specialize in working with families and individuals to help them define their financial goals and have a better relationship with their money.
So next slide, we told you that Think with a Drink is brought to you by the Ares Foundation for Financial Education. You can visit us on the web. It's aresfoundation.org. And our mission is trying to help everyone have a better relationship with their money. Because whether you realize it or not, you are in a relationship with money. And just like every other personal relationship you have in your life, there are behaviors and triggers that occur that can cause us to act, well, Craig and I like to say a little rationally sometimes when dealing with your money and your finances. All myself, Craig, the rest of the Ares team tries to do is to take a little bit of that emotion out of the equation, take a step back, and get a better handle on and direction of how you're controlling your financial life. All right, the agenda for today's show is, there's the other way. Next slide, please.
It's so confusing.
I'm sorry, the following us, right? So we're on just about every social media channel out there. LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. If you're watching this, you could do us a favor. Whatever is your favorite social media channel, just go ahead and follow us, like us, check us out, the posts that we have, some of the stuff that we've been doing. Happy to have another follower out there. We're trying to get the word out about the foundation as much as we can, so we certainly would appreciate that. So next slide now, the agenda, which is, what we're drinking, because it is Think with a Drink after all. What is a target date? What is the, how does this whole thing work? How did it come about? All of those things. The advantages. We'll do a segment that we call our Misbehaving with Money Minute.
Yep.
Then we'll talk about the disadvantages, and then some considerations when we're talking about handling or dealing with target dates, investing, and how all of that works. Okay, so what we're drinking, if you can, we are drinking in this one, what is that Sam Adams commercial there? Like, okay to Beer Fest. Right? It's Sam Oktoberfest, if you want to bring the slide up for that. So Oktoberfest, this is Sam Adams. Yes, you've seen the ads, right? So Oktoberfest, this is a fest beer, right? So this is meant to be, caramel. Think of this as, dealing with, brats and sausage and pretzels and all of those things. That's,
Health food.
Yes. It's all very healthy food. Yes, of course, very healthy food. But that's the idea with an Oktoberfest. Sam's, this is part of their Fall Fest pack. So if you ever want to just check it out, you can just, grab a Fall Fest. It's a multi-pack that's got a bunch of these flavors in it. And it's, at this time of the year, especially in the fall, it's great to have because it definitely helps getting through the little bit of the chill in the air and a little bit of bite. So, skål. All right. So moving on to target dates, right? So the idea here with the target date, next slide, please. How did this come about, right? So honestly, we're going back really into the beginning of the 2000s, right? So in the beginning of the 2000s, you had at that time legislation that opened up the 529 college savings plan. Right? So when the college savings plan started, what they had were target portfolios. We were taking the child from whatever age they were at, and we were going to invest the money until they either got to college, then they started getting cute with stuff, and it was through college.
Right.
But these were portfolios that were going to drift as you got closer to the end date, because we're going to start out aggressive when the child was young, and then we were going to get more conservative when we were going to need the money,
Right.
and start taking it out. And somewhere, I don't know who, because I don't have the details on who greenlit or opened up the whole conversation for it, but they realized, hey, we can do the same thing for people in retirement plans. Let's just take it, instead of being to age 18 or through college to age 22, let's take it to age 65.
Right.
And essentially, the entire target date industry was born at that time, right? So they haven't been around for decades and decades. They've been around for about 20 years now, the target dates and their original iteration in terms of what happened and how it came about. But that's the concept here. The idea is that this is attempting to take you from point A, whatever age you are today,
Yep.
to point B.
29.
Okay. Craig's 29.
Today.
To age 65. However, well, then how many years until 65 for you?
I think that would be 36 years.
Okay, there we go. So 36 years from today is?
Oh, you didn't ask me. 79. 2079.
No, 2059.
2059.
So
That's
that
what
would
I
be
said.
2060. There we go. So he already failed math, right? So there's the 2060 fund. If he was 29, the target date fund he would be in would be the 2060. That's the closest to age 65 for him. So he would be in the 2060 fund. And what the conversation is, the 2060 fund is going to be very, very aggressive today. And eventually, as he gets to 2060, will become a 50-50 mix, 50% in equities, 50% in bonds or cash.
And equities are like stocks and mutual funds, right?
Stocks, and actually the stocks, mutual funds are made up of a series of
stocks,
stocks,
right.
In terms of going through that. So the next slide talks about this glide path, right? So the idea here is that you have this glide path, and if you can see it on the screen, it's essentially the one white line, the solid light line, that's the target date, right? That's the age that you've, in Craig's case, as if he was 29, the 2060, that would be 2060 on the map, right? Where he is today would be 29 years old. That would be the far, on my, for me, I guess behind me is the far right over my shoulder. I don't know. But the one with 100%, we're showing it, major equity in that situation. But as you can, if you follow the line across, you're getting to just about a 50-50 mix at that solid light line where it intersects with the downward path, and then goes for another approximately 10 or so years before it flattens out. We're going to talk about the reasons that this is positive and negative with target dates, but understand that that's the whole idea of the glide path. And one of the things I think trips up a lot of people when looking at these is to understand that the 2050, the 2055, the 2060, they even have a 2065 now, by the way.
Well, that's why I was going towards 79, right?
That all of these are the same portfolios because the portfolio hasn't really started onto the glide path yet. So it doesn't really matter. You're in the same portfolio, and that's going to be part of the conversation here as we go through this and what makes sense for folks, whether or not that's going to work for everybody in terms of going through this.
Sure.
Next slide. So this is for Craig and I, this is our governing body there, FINRA, right? So the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. These are the people who sit over our shoulders. Even though funds with identical target dates may look the same, they may have different investment strategies and asset allocations that can affect how risky they are and what they are worth at any given point in time, including when and after you retire. So this is the conversation. This is FINRA. This is our regulatory agency telling you not every target date is the same. They're not all cookie cutter. They don't all work the same.
That's right. Like every hot dog's not the same. They're all hot dogs, but they're not all the same.
They're not all the same?
No.
Oh, yeah, no, I knew that. I'm a hot dog guy, so I knew that. Next slide. All right, so you can hit the button because they'll all come up in terms of this. So you've asset allocation, you've automatic investment, risk, and managed accounts. These are the advantages. So if you just click to the slide, they'll come up. Right, so the first one there, asset allocation. So the idea here is that this is being set up where it's not all your eggs in one basket, right? That's the old adage to that. It's not all of the same or similar. There is a diversified portfolio that is being set up, even if it's all equities. Equities break down into a whole lot of different asset categories. We don't want to get too deep into that as far as this, but you have in our world what are large caps, mid caps, small caps. You have, high yield bonds, low, investment grade bonds, corporate bonds, et cetera. And so it takes the blanket of whatever is available and builds the portfolio. That's what the makeup of that target date fund is.
Correct. And if you're ever really interested in what's in there, you get this thing, it's called the prospectus, which is just a book, and it really is a book, that tells all the funds that they're invested in and how they're invested, what percentages and performance and all that data is in there.
So the second one that was on there, we call it set it and forget it, right? So this is, you don't really have to think about that whole idea of, wait a minute, should I be rebalancing this whole conversation of, what's happening to the portfolio? It's being done for you. And as a participant in a retirement plan, which is really where these came about and really where they're utilized most, it's like $1 trillion industry now, that it's really, I'm putting the money in and the plan itself, that glide path is managing everything for me.
Yep.
And go ahead.
I was going to say, and that's the whole point, right? The issue is a lot of people get intimidated by dealing with money, especially their investments, right? And especially in their retirement accounts. So this is a way to kind of like say, okay, this is the date I want to retire, and let it kind of be automatically handled, right. Which includes, picking the investments to handling the risk categories, all along the way. And it's a good starting point for a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely. And, it's one of those things that we talk to everybody about taking the time and going in and looking at dealing with that. One of the others that's on there, as Craig said, that risk management factor, because the idea is it's taking some of that risk that you would normally associate, because what happens with a lot of investors is they tend to waver, or I don't want to say panic, but panic when you're in the market and things are happening. You can't really move the portfolio unless you sell it out and go to cash. The portfolio is going to keep doing what it's doing. It's going to keep marching on that glide path all the way down the line, so you don't really have to worry about that. And the same thing goes with the last one, which is it's professionally managed. There are portfolio managers. In most cases, when it's a retirement plan, you've got a portfolio that is made up of all the managers that are available inside that fund family. So they're, a large cap, a mid cap, a small cap, like we talked about, all those managers. You have somebody who's managing those particular pieces, the allocation inside the strategy, and then somebody who's overseeing the whole thing from a whole.
Right.
As it's rolling its way down the glide path.
And when we talk about large cap, small cap, mid cap, that refers to the size of the companies that they're investing the dollars in, correct?
Correct.
So your large cap is going to be your giant companies like a GE or an Apple or something like that.
It's actually more than $7 billion in capitalization to be categorized as a large cap.
That's large. That's like ginormous.
A mid cap is 2 to 7 billion, and a small cap is anything under $2 billion in terms of capitalization. That's full capitalization.
I'd like to be a small cap.
Yeah. Well, that just triggers just about everything after that in terms of dealing with it. But those are the parameters in terms of that. But what we're saying is there's somebody who's actually going through, and not only the individual pieces that are inside the portfolio which are being managed, but then you have somebody who's overseeing the whole management, that process as it goes along the glide path. Now, they are held to certain, again, the percentages have to be as it goes along the path. They're sort of a preset thing. Like I said, by the time they get to the target date, they've got to be close to 50-50 or whatever the modeling is calling for.
Right. They don't have the ability to just choose.
Right.
The market's going in this direction. I'm going to throw everything in.
Right. So that's the risk reduction. That's where that risk reduction comes into play, because you don't have that, oh, wait, everything looks good. I'm going to buy more of this, or I'm going to sell all of that type of thing. That doesn't happen in that scenario, because the parameters are the glide path has to continue. Okay. All right, so now we're going to introduce a segment that we've been bringing in for a new part with the show. It's called Misbehaving with Money Minute. And so for this one, with I don't know what happened there.
That's okay.
Our bar got cut off. Look at that.
It's
So
right
it's all right. At least they can still see our drinks. That's a good thing. So this one, go ahead, next slide.
If it wasn't the other way, it would have been worse.
Yeah, I know. So in this case, the Misbehaving with Money Minute is using a credit card to make ATM withdrawals, right? So if you need to take money out, if you don't have a debit card, I'm suggesting you go and get one. We'll find one, or there's some way to get that. Because if you use your credit card to get cash out of an ATM, one, this gets counted on your credit score. There's a whole conversation we did. You can look up the show we just did on credit scores and why that's not good to do that type of thing. But it also affects everything else that you're doing. If you can go back to the slide for a second. So that future loan decision making, because that's one that when we're talking about credit and credit scores, that's one I think that really is impactful for everybody, is to realize that somebody could look at this as your spending habit and the way that you are using your money, so that it could affect that if you go to, whether it's to buy a home, buy a car type of thing, you could get impacted by that.
Yeah, I mean, dealing with thousands of clients, what I've found is when you're doing a budget for people, that the cash transactions are usually not tracked.
Right.
Right, so they have no idea a lot of the times where that miscellaneous cash went to. It could be as much as 10 to 20% of your budget that you don't have a clue because it was all cash,
right,
where that went.
All right, so next slide. So now we talked about the positives, what was good with target dates. Now we're going to go into, all right, we don't want to call them negatives, but maybe just the cons, right? Pro, con, that type of thing. Okay, so the first one is the glide path. Right, so we talked, everything is built off the glide path. The problem with the target date with the glide path is, all right, Craig was 29 is what he said, right, in terms of that? He's 29 years old.
So my license says.
Well, if we were both 29, right, Craig's situation may be different from mine. He may be in a better place, he may have more money, he may not need to take as much risk as I would if I didn't have enough. But in a target date situation, we're both in the same risk profile. We're both on the same path, whereas we might have different needs in terms of what we're trying to achieve. If you can go back to the slide again, just for a quick sec. So that's the same thing that goes with risk in terms of it, right? Because what happens there with the risk in the portfolios, like we said, is, specifically when we were talking about back in the financial crisis, 2007, 2009, these portfolios had not been around all that long at that time. And because they were in these built for you modeling, people expected them to be more conservatively set up.
Right.
They expected them to have less risk in them. And the reality was, they were, it was unfortunate, but in the market downturn of the financial crisis, you're talking about a loss of somewhere close to 30% on most of those portfolios.
Well, right. That was a negative. The positive was if you stayed in the portfolio, it came back.
Well, right. That's the whole idea of stay invested. But I think, for a lot of people, they look at them and say, oh, this is going to be something that's built for me. I don't have to worry about the risk that I'm being exposed to on the downside. And the reality is, like we said, in those early portfolios, there's nothing but risk. There's no downside protection in most of these portfolios when Mr. 2060 or 2065 or whatever the hell you were.
Well, that's right. But the issue, once again, is what you're talking about over a longer period of time is I don't care about the 20% down, even though you think you do, because I'm not cashing it out today. What I'm really worried about is dollar cost averaging.
Right.
I'm going to keep putting money in over a longer period of time. In fact, if I'm having a downturn like we had in 2008, 2007, 2008, I'd want to be pumping as much more money into it as I can,
Right.
right? Because buy while it's down.
Yeah, I mean, the other is for short-term investing, this isn't really a place to be, right? Because the problem there is this is going to take a lot of swings. You're going to see swings and turns in these portfolios. So really not built for being on that short-term basis. And the other downturn there, the last one on there, we're not targeting or saying anything with any of the portfolios that are out there. But these are investments that are built by a company using all of their funds. And if Craig was the guy who was overseeing the portfolio and I was one of the portfolio managers and we were really good buddies, and it's in my best interest because I'm inside this portfolio, is he going to fire me?
Maybe.
Maybe. That's the conversation.
Business is business, man. You are Italian. You know how that works.
Yeah, it's a business, right? But so there is some of that. Gee, do we give this manager a little leeway? Do we give him a little extra room, a little rope to go a little further? If we had normally, we would have probably pulled him. It's a question that comes up with just how those funds are chosen, how the mix is outlined, and how it's dealt with inside the portfolio. It's just another of those. All right, I'm not really in control here at all, so I can't say I don't want that fund in the mix like we talked about. You don't have the ability to just say I don't want to be in the small cap or emerging markets fund or something like that. You have to be, because it's all part of the same portfolio. You can't pull a piece out. You're in it and have to stay there.
Right, and you have the same issue when you're doing your own diversification, except it's one piece that they have control over, not the entire portfolio.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. But you're allocating to that one strategy
Right.
in that mix in terms of dealing with it. So next slide, so things to be considering when you're dealing with, so the idea here is, what are you trying to accomplish with your portfolio? And as Craig said, that's how much should I be saving? And what's the target goal when we're talking about whether it's retirement, whether it's funding, whether it's for a plan, something, the idea is you've got to be thinking about how much am I putting in and sticking to that, right? We'll talk about that in a second, about that sticking to it and sticking with it part of this. But the idea here is that you want to make sure you know why you're doing it.
Absolutely, you do.
Because that's one of the major pieces and one of the major hurdles that causes problems for everybody, is they get into it without thinking about why are you getting into it or why am I doing this?
Right, I think it's like you said, and whenever you're starting off, especially if it's a new plan, you don't have a lot of money invested in there anyway. So how much risk are you really taking when you first get started? The issue is, as the years creep on and your portfolio grows, is it still doing what you wanted it to do?
Yeah.
And exactly what did you want it to do? What do you want for an outcome? And nobody ever thinks about that.
Right.
What do you want the outcome to be when your retirement plan, when you hit that target date? What should it be looking like? And if you're not backing up into that, well, then you're not controlling what's going on with your investments.
Next slide. So some considerations, some things to be thinking about with this. So we talked about, setting, we'll always talk about setting a goal. Right? You gotta set the goal. Like Craig said, what are you trying to accomplish? How are you trying to get to it? And then you need to have the plan in place to get there. Because honestly, a goal without a plan is just hope. And hope is not a plan. The time horizon, this gets into the conversation number 3 there about how long do I have to go? How much time do I have? Because like I said, somebody who's in their mid-50s who's just starting to contribute versus somebody who's in their mid-50s who's been contributing since they were in their 20s have two very separate amounts they were trying to achieve and not necessarily might be the best fit here for what they're trying to do. Can you just go back to the slide one real quick on that? Because we bring in risk. We talked about rebalancing, right? So we've talked about that a little bit. So rebalancing is just the idea that if I've got 4 funds and there's 25% in each of those 4 funds, that's 100%. Well, at some point, those four funds aren't going to be 25, 25, 25, 25. Something's going to have done well, something's going to do bad. I've got to go back in and make them all 25 again. You don't have to do that in a target date. They're doing it for you. So you sort of take that off the table, that whole need to be doing it, but it is important. And as Craig said, it's a great way to start out. And maybe then start to thread in a little bit more. All right, I want to take a little bit of risk, or maybe I do have ties or things in international that I want to be part of, and so I can add it in.
Right. And if you just want to wash your hands because you just don't understand any of this stuff, and that's what you end up doing as a target dated fund, it's not the worst thing in the world. Once again, because you are getting the advantage of what we call institutional investing, which means they're not making any emotional decision. Like Tom said earlier, the market goes down, they keep they march in the same beat. It goes up, they march the same beat. So they're not saying, oh no, the world is ending, Chicken Little, I'm going to sell everything and go into cash. Which, a lot of people, that hurts a lot of people because they don't recover.
Yeah.
Right?
That was our adage during the pandemic. Wash your hands, don't touch your 401k. Just to go back to his washing the hands thing, right? That was the adage there.
Yeah, I say that a bigger mistake would be not to be contributing to your plan in some way.
Right. So next slide. So, one of the things we say to everybody, if you've got questions, if you've got concerns, reach out to us. That's why the foundation is here. That QR code on the screen, you can just stop it right now and shoot that, take your phone out, shoot the QR code. It's going to open up our calendar. You can schedule a time with us, right? Anytime, it's just, go ahead, stop the screen, do that, pull the QR code. Because honestly, regardless of who set up your plan, regardless of who set up the allocation, who set up that strategy, you can't get a second opinion from the person who set it up. That just doesn't work, right? So sometimes it helps to have a second set of eyes just to go through that.
Yeah, the other big mistake is don't make assumptions. Talk to so many people who said, well, I put in enough to get the full match, that should be enough for retirement, right?
Right.
Because they think the full match means they've done the calculation for you and they know how much you're going to need in retirement. That tells you nothing, right? Because everybody's needs are different. So you don't want to be finding this out 2-3 years before you're ready to retire that, oh, I should have been putting in 6%, 7%, 10%. Or the opposite. Some people dump everything in to get the full deduction and find out they're so overfunded for retirement and now they're paying taxes on all this money. So you really want to, like I said, find out what that end goal should be and come up with a plan to make sure that happens.
And then the last slide is just, again, how to reach out to us. So you can visit the website, it's ariesfoundation.org. That one has the /contact, but if you go onto the website, you'll get to the contact page. That schedule, that link is the same thing as the QR code. So you can just copy and paste that and we can go from there. The email, we're happy to answer an email. That's info@ariesfoundation.org. And lastly, because we're trying to pump up our Instagram channel, it's, check us out on Instagram or any of the social medias. Like we said, give us a look, talk to us at that. But we want to say, have a great evening. Skål.